sure this is turned up. Hey folks, this is Mike Brown, and this is Hometown Novel Writers Association's author program that we have at the Coweta FORCE Center here in downtown Newnan. We're back in this brand new facility that they've been blessed to have. Almost all of this has been donated, and I'm going to let Scott say a little bit more about it since Hank and Shelley are not here tonight. But we are so privileged to be here tonight, and we're going to be obviously recording this on Facebook, and you'll be getting this also available on YouTube after the event is over. Couple of things that I wanted to make a comment about, because this has been a very momentous month for us. The Hometown Novel Writers Association Incorporated is officially a Georgia recognized corporation, and it will be a 501(c), got to say that right, nonprofit. And so we are moving forward with that. And matter of fact, one of the first events that we have that we are actually co-hosting with the town of Sharpsburg is the Sharpsburg Book Fair, which will be held on August 27th. In other words, a week from this Saturday, in downtown, historic downtown Sharpsburg. They're going to have over 35 authors filling in the community center, their pavilion on the grounds. We're going to have speakers speaking throughout the day with music and food on the gazebo on the grounds with so many authors you guys won't even know what's going on. And it'll be for all ages, so it's a great opportunity for you to bring the whole family out. We've got a handful, more than a handful, of children and young adult middle grade authors that'll be there, not to mention a slew of authors that cover all the genres with mystery and suspense and romance. Historical is all going to be there talking about their books, and you'll find out how much talent exists in not just Coweta County, but in the entire surrounding communities that are south of Atlanta along the I-85 corridor. And that's kind of where we focus a lot of our attention. And we've got a lot of authors who are traveling from greater Atlanta to take part with us, so we're really pleased with that. We're going to be raising money, so this is another reason to be there. We've raised money. The event's free, so we've already raised this money to underwrite 4 scholarships that will be for selected high school students to attend the Atlanta Writers Conference in November. And it'll be a great opportunity for these the next creative writing geniuses that are coming up through the high school ranks that may want to write a novel someday. And they'll get the chance to meet literary agents and publishers and see and meet other authors who have published their books. So we're pleased with that. We're also going to be making a donation to the Coweta First Readers Program, which supplies books to young children from the cradle to preschool. And every $40 pays for a year's worth of books to be sent to the family for that child. And it's always age appropriate to the child. And it's a fantastic program, and we're glad to be affiliated with them. And matter of fact, they will be at the fair to talk more about their program if you're interested in finding out about it. We hope that you will be there. So that's the Sharpsburg Book Fair. Again, that is a week from this Saturday on the 27th. Events will begin at 10 a.m. in the morning and run until 5 o'clock that day. So come on out and enjoy the day. There's a couple other things that are happening with the Hometown Novel Writers Association that is affecting the programming that we're doing. So just to kind of give you what's coming up in the next month. On the other side of the book fair, what you'll find is on September 15th, we'll be returning to the Newnan Carnegie Library. It's a Thursday night at 6:30, and it'll be a featured storyline for it. It's called The Stories of the South, and we'll be presenting Elizabeth Springer, Ann Lovett, Larry Reed, Pam Avery, who you're going to get to meet a little bit tonight, will be there again, and then Scott Ludwig, our ever funny moderator, will be taking controlling what's going on that night at the Carnegie Library. So we hope that you'll certainly come out. And then on October 8th, we're going to be bringing our Hometown Novel Writers Association author program south down to LaGrange to the Pretty Goods bookstore, where we've had phenomenal turnouts for the events that we've already held there. And we're looking forward to bringing that group down there. And we're going to be featuring the rising I didn't answer it.
You responded, thanks.
Rule number 1 at author events, turn your phones off. But I'm using it to film this tonight, so sorry about that, folks. So anyway, and then we'll return back here on October 20th. But in addition, while that's happening, on top of all these author events, what we have also starting up is we just had a writer's workshop this past Saturday, and the next one will be in November, and that's going to be featuring Susan Crawford, who we had last fall. But it's going to be the very first live simulcast workshop that we've done in conjunction with the Newnan Carnegie Library. So all aspiring writers have an opportunity to attend in person to listen to the wisdom of Susan Crawford, who has nationally published 2 books, and she's got her next one already headed in that direction. And hopefully by then we'll have some good news about that. Also, we have our monthly Writers Critique Group, which is still virtual, and that's every second Monday. It allows writers to be encouraged, if they're in the writing process, to submit a portion of their writing to the virtual group to get some assistance and help and encouragement to writing better, to get their novels published and promoted, obviously. And then starting on September 12th, Corner Arts Gallery on the square in Newnan is hosting, allowing us to use their facility to begin a weekly writers group meeting there, where we'll be able to come together as writers, no matter where you are in your walk as a writer, whether you're still thinking about it or whether you're now trying to publish your 2nd or 3rd book. Come out, plan to be a part of what we're doing, and we're going to be sharing with one another, encouraging with one another, helping one another, and we'll be having guest speakers each week with topics related to the writing program. And I just figured that nothing makes the writing process less lonely than to be in a group. You get there in a group, you get around fellow writers who can experience the same problems and challenges and fears that you have. And it's been extremely successful. We're proud to have seen some of the members of our writers group go on to publish their books and to come out just being just more confident people. And there's some people in the room here tonight that are going through that process right now. So with that in mind, I'm not going to take up much more airspace than that, because I'm going to turn this over to Scott Ludwig, our Louis Grizzard-like guy and famous writer and columnist. Take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Hello at home at Facebook, people. A couple of words about Coweta FORCE. They've moved into the new building 2 months ago in June, and this is our 2nd presentation here, and we have another one in October. So we encourage you to come out and see the facility. If you can't come to that and you're not here tonight, they're going to have their first open house on Saturday, August 27th, which unfortunately is the same day as our book festival. So I'll be at the book festival all day, but if you want to travel around Coweta County, you can hit both of them that day. And while I'm on that subject of August 27th, my church is having a men's work day that day, breakfast and work day. So Pastor Brooks, if you're watching, that's where I'm going to be. So I hope that counts as an excused absence. So the format for tonight is we're one author short, so that means I get to talk longer. But before that, I'm going to tell you what the panel is going to be answering tonight. I'm going to give them 3 questions, and they're going to answer it in round robin format. And anytime you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and ask. And then if we have time at the end, and we will, we'll go one last time in case there's something, oh yeah, I wanted to say that too. So you have a chance of that. The 3 questions that we're going to ask them, and they've already been prepped with these, is number 1, tell us a little about something about yourself, where you're from, your family, and life in general. Number 2, tell us about your writing journey, how you became interested in writing, what inspires you, and how you go about your daily writing. And number 3, what have you written, and what are you currently working on? So before you haven't done your homework yet, you can do it right now while I'm rambling, okay? So now let's see where I am. Oh, at the end of the presentation tonight, you'll have a chance to buy their books. They're on sale over here on the side. And I encourage you to do that. There's no bigger compliment to an author than for someone to buy their book. And that's not actually right. The biggest compliment is if you take the time to read their book.
And leave a review.
Buy the book so you can read the book. So I know a lot of people at home in the audience maybe think that authors have it made. All they do is sit in their office or behind their desk and spend 6 to 12 months writing a book, and then they turn it over to the publisher, and then it's published, and then it starts selling 1 million copies, and all they do is kick back and let the royalties roll in. And that's exactly right. If your name is James Patterson, John Grisham, or Stephen King. If your name is Scott Ludwig, this is how it goes. And you can empathize if you like. Yes.
I'm growing.
Okay, so the first 4 or 5 books I wrote were all about running, because that was my forte. It used to be anyway. So I self-published those, and I promoted them on my own at running clubs. So the first time I spoke at the Chattahoochee Roadrunners Club on the north side of the planet at Mellow Mushroom. Big crowd, bad acoustics, sold maybe 3 or 4 books, but I got free pizza. Second time I went to the Peachtree City Running Club, big format. I was at the Wyndham Conference Center, big auditorium, 50 plus people in attendance. I had my friend in the back of the room, Al, selling my books. And I spoke for about 25 minutes, and then I answered questions for 30 more. I said, wow, this group's really interested. I'm going to sell a ton. And I went back and said, Al, how do we do? Apparently I told him everything he needed to know. So, wow. Then I got invited to the Macon Tracks running club. They had one of their summer events at somebody's home, had a pool in the backyard, and families were invited. And I was speaking on the backyard with one of those like Mr. Microphone things for acoustics. And it was going really well. I was just getting to the heart of the presentation about a run through Death Valley. And all of a sudden one of the kids shouted, "Peter pooped in the pool." And that was the end of my presentation. So I did sell a book, that was on the way to the car, and that was the guy that invited me, and I think he felt bad because Peter pooped in the pool. So anyway, then I got a call from a headhunter. He was representing the Maguire Publishing Company, and they wanted to buy the rights to my 3rd book, which was about that run I talked about through Death Valley. Apparently it was selling really well, and it caught their attention, and they wanted to sign me to a deal. So they bought the rights to the book, and the first thing they did, they set me up at the Barnes & Noble on Peachtree Street. They set me up for a weeknight presentation, July 11th. And those that know, that's the weekend for the Peachtree Road Race. So I said, oh, this is great, because the Barnes & Noble is right on the course, about the mile mark. So the week before I spoke, and the day before the race, we went up there and kind of checked out the course. And I looked in the window, and there was a poster on the window. I had my picture and it said, speaking, and I thought, well, this is cool. I said, they need a much bigger place than this. So that wasn't exactly right. I got there and they had 12 chairs, and 11 of them actually got taken up by us. Cindy took one of them, so I guess you could say counted. So anyway, but I did sell about a dozen books that night, so that was a good step. So I didn't tell you about Maguire, but they're based in Germany, and they ended up publishing 4 of my books in total, and they wanted me to be their next big thing. They really like my sense of humor, and if you know anything about Germans, that was unusual because Germans have no sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So they said, would you be interested in talking to any more bookstores? And I said, that would be great. And they said, do you know any? I said, yes, I do. I said, would you like your information? Would you like your information? And they said, no, but I suggest you call them. Okay, I see how this is going to go. So I called the the Books and Million in Peachtree City. And they set me up for a Sunday afternoon. So I took a dozen books there, thinking, surely that might not be enough. So I had some in the trunk just in case all 12 sold. So I was there 4 hours, which ended up being about 1 hour for each of the 4 people that stopped by. And let me tell you the people that stopped by. One was a running friend who came for moral support, and they had already read my book. Another was my brother-in-law, who didn't run, and he knew if he wanted to read it, he could get mine. And he didn't run anyway, and he never read it. One was my wife, who obviously had the book, and she brought my grandson with her. And my grandson, Christian, he didn't have any money. If he did, he would have spent it on a Happy Meal. Plus, he was 3 at the time. And the 4th person stopped by, a complete stranger. I said, here we go. And he asked me if Books A Million had a bathroom they could use. So that's how that went. I didn't sell any books. So the best luck I personally had ever selling books was at a book festival about 12 years ago called Books Down South. It was in Fayetteville. I think it's where the Pinewood Studios now has their headquarters. It was an old elementary school, but it was a really nice event. They had maybe 20 local authors, and I think, well, Mike, we have maybe 30 more, so we're going to top that. But
Yep.
we had really good traffic that day. I sold about a dozen books. Incidentally, half of those went to one person who bought all 6 I had written by that time, which I thought was cool. Although I never heard from her again. And I could have sold more if I had so many people stop by that they said, "Are any of your books for young adults, for children?" I went, "No." And they kept opening the books in. "Are you sure?" I had to be honest, really not. Unless they lie or if they... So I didn't sell any, but I said, "I promise I will have one next year." And I did have one next year, only they didn't have the festival next year. And they haven't had one since. So hopefully we can fill that void with ours. So stop by, I will be there. I'll have most of my books there. My grandson's doing the selling for me because I don't sell, but I buy really well. So I'm really looking forward to it. So now I'm ready to introduce our authors for tonight. And as I've done for several months now, I introduce them by way of one of their book reviews. So who would like to go first? Mark, you're closest, so we'll start with Mark. So, Mark Wallace Maguire is our first author. The review. I was surprised how quickly I became engrossed in this action thriller. The main character is very relatable for me, and at several points, I stopped to question what I would do in his situation. My choices weren't always his, but that's one of the reasons I enjoyed the book. I live vicariously through him, always on the precipice.
Yes, sir.
I think that was a typo on here.
Yeah, probably.
On his point, I took it right off.
No, that's about me.
Okay. For your willingness to do some sketchy stuff to stay alive. The plot will have conspiracy theorists nodding smugly. There are some great what-ifs along the way. The book is Alexandria Rising, and the author is Mark Wallace Maguire.
Yay!
Yeah, Mark.
I was worried you were going to read one of the really bad ones. Because I've gotten a few of those.
I did that for Stephen King one time.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. The second review, different book. I grew up in the South and loved reading stories about familiar land and cultures, but didn't expect to be drawn into the story so quickly and adamantly. The characters are multifaceted, the pace is exciting, and there are many unexpected twists and turns. The author's way with words allows the reader to participate in the compelling saga. It makes it hard to put the book down. The ending hints of more to come, and I can't wait. Can you tell I thoroughly enjoyed this book? The book is The Tanner Side of Town, and the author is Pam Avery. So we'll start with the questions. We'll start with Mark first. Tell us a little something about yourself, where you're from, your family, and life in general.
So, it's a long time ago. Sorry, I give this guy a hard time. No, I grew up throughout the South. My father was a preacher, and I'm a recovering preacher's son, which explains a lot of what is wrong with me, and that's what I blame it on. So I've lived in 15, 16 cities. Been in Fayetteville now for 15 years, and I've claimed that as my hometown. I love this part of Georgia. I worked in journalism for 17 years, in magazines and print media, newspapers, as a editor and columnist and director and all that good stuff, and left that industry about 5 years ago and rebooted my career in videography and digital communications. I live in Fayetteville with my very devoted, angelic wife who puts up with me, and 2 teenagers who drive me nuts. And they won't watch this, so it doesn't matter, because anything Dad does isn't worth watching or being a part of, right? If you all have teenagers. So I love it. around here, been in the metro area for a quarter of a century. I love the A, love the ATL, love red clay country, wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And then I have my dark secrets, which for an extra $20 afterwards tonight, I'll share with y'all. So NDA, no cell phones allowed, totally off the record. No buyers.
I'll only charge you $50 for me not sharing those $20 worth of secrets.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So none of it's going to be true anyway.
Is this gonna come up in the lightning round at the end?
It is.
It is. Good, so
Are we
stick
going to do
around.
like the if
Stick
or,
around.
you know? Yep.
Right, thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Pam?
Actually, I live where I was raised, northern Harris County, right on the Troup County line. It's called Jones Crossroads. My family's been there for a very long time, greats and onward. And actually, I was raised on the farm that my grandparents bought in 1920, in the house that my grandfather built. And so I got a lot of deep roots there, a lot of heritage, a lot of tradition, a lot of stories. Come from a long line of storytellers. When I was a little girl, we didn't have a TV, you know, so we'd sit on the front porch, and my father and some of his friends, cousins, would tell stories. And I can remember, you know, big wraparound front porch and no air conditioning, so you went outside, you know, to try to cool off at night. And I can remember listening to their stories and thinking, oh, I hope I can tell stories like that someday. Just the richness and how entranced I was. So as soon as I could leave and go to the University of Georgia, though, I packed my bags. And I did that when I was 17. I actually left high school a year early and went to Georgia. Majored in journalism, public relations, and marketing. Because at that time, that was the only industry that welcomed women. Late 60s, early 70s, that was it. If you were going to be able to make it in any kind of occupation other than the accepted roles for women, it was in journalism. So my first job out of college was with CNS Bank in Atlanta, making $150 a week before taxes. I was a traveling teller, but I met an awful lot of people and learned a lot, because I had to learn how to get myself around Atlanta to different branches, and I was only 21. So I learned a lot of savviness and resolve at that point. I got transferred back to Athens with the bank, and myself and two other women pounded on the HR director's office door until he finally put us on the management training program. Because back then, women were not allowed on the management training program. So that happened, and through that, I met these young guys who had just started a renegade newspaper, a weekly. And I convinced them to join the Chamber of Commerce. And they were just, you know, renegades, you know, from the word go. And when they signed their pledge card to join the chamber, and he handed it to me, and I started to take it, and he wouldn't let me. He said, look, if you could convince us to join the Chamber of Commerce, you could convince anybody in this town to buy an ad. Will you come tomorrow and talk to us about it? So I said, sure, why not? So I did, and I left a job at CNS. I put in my notice for 2 weeks. I left a job at CNS making good money for a 20-something-year-old woman. I went to work at this newspaper for commission only. My father thought I'd lost my mind. And he said, but, you know, you got to try it. Well, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. As a result of that, I started my first business when I was 25, a restaurant, and then sold it 2 years later, and went to Key West and started cooking on a dive boat for Treasure Hunter.
Oh, wow.
And that'll be a story one day. And that's when I really, because up to this point, at that point, my writing had been commercial, you know, ads, this kind of thing. And I started journaling then, playing around with some lyrics, and nobody's ever read what I wrote then, and probably won't. But that's when I realized how much I enjoyed expressing myself on a page. It gave me so much relief. It gave me such a sense of control about my feelings, because I was actually putting them down on paper. You know, this was before there was a therapist on the corner, right? And then, after I'd done that, all I wanted to do, I came back and started teaching dancing at a ballet studio. And my teacher actually, and I've been dancing my whole life. I didn't just start dancing. But she actually wrote the plays that we produced. And I thought that was so intriguing. So, when my grandparents passed away, and it was time for me to come home and look after some things, I came back and started doing that, teaching dance and writing plays. Did that for 20 some odd years. Raised my children now, who are now grown. And so that's, you know, kind of me in a nutshell. I mean, I've had a lot of really diverse career, but I've always taken the opportunity. I think one of the best things like you that I ever did was I worked for a newspaper group for 8 years after my son went off to college. And because, you know, you can't do that, and you can't be a journalist and put up at night.
Right.
That two just don't go. But that was some of the best training I ever had, working for a newspaper. And when we parted ways, I went back to school and got my master's from the University of Memphis in social and digital media. And I was 60 when I did that. And then I started teaching at Columbus State University. And that's the other thing. You want to hone your craft teaching.
Right.
You know, I mean, if you want to get better at a skill, then teach it. And then my son ran for statewide office, and I had to use my writing skills in that direction. And then I took a year off and to work on the house. And then I said, what am I going to do now? And I walked to my office and I said, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through all this stuff I've accumulated. I'm going to write that book that my friend Jane's been telling me. And that was actually in January before the pandemic started. It's perfect timing for me. So I've had I've lived.
Awesome.
And I think that's one of the best things a writer can do, is to live. I know it's a long story, but I know it's been real, you know, like this.
That's right.
It's a well-traveled journey,
Yes.
Pam. Hey, I'm dying to ask you a question because you said you went down to Key West and you were a cook on a dive boat
Right.
for a,
Treasure hunter.
what is his name, Mel Fisher?
Yes, it was.
Really? What year? There's a reason I asked. What year was this?
I worked for Mel, and I'll tell you, I always have to think when I sold my restaurant.
Were they still looking for the?
78.
Okay, they just started looking for the Etosha. Okay, if you come to the Sharpsburg Book Fair, you can meet Jedwin Smith, who was the reporter that Mel took out when they were pulling in the Etosha.
Oh my
The
God,
treasures.
I wish I couldn't know that's a Democratic convention.
I know you told me that.
I'm so-
Jedwin is one of the authors that'll be there, and he wrote the book about that.
Oh my gosh, I would love, because that was a fascinating journey.
Yeah, and he has a fabulous book. I figured the odds were
Yeah.
pretty strong. So that's all. Jedwin would love to meet you. You two would be swapping stories.
Well,
Well, the Corey's could meet again.
I'll give him my card, huh?
The Corey's could meet again.
I'll give you my card so you can give it.
I will be happy to do so. I know Jedwin real well. Yeah.
That was a fascinating journey.
Oh, yeah.
You know, living on a boat is,
The lives that were lost to do it too.
oh,
So.
the lives that, I mean, now, I didn't look, it wasn't a yacht, okay?
No, it was the rust bucket.
It was a work boat, right? And if you've ever cooked on a boat, that is a hard job. You know, and I was cooking for 8 voracious divers. 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. So it wasn't, you know,
Interesting story. Well, that's a little sideline, but that was a small world right there.
that's great. I
fabulous.
put my card.
Oh yeah, and he's a journalist too, by the way. Sorry
What's the
for.
name of Jedwin's book?
Um.
Don't look at me, I forget.
Oh my gosh.
You gave it away here.
I know. I gave it away to my niece, who's a diver at Pensacola, Fort Walton. I'll give you the answer to that in just a couple of minutes, because she'll look. Because my phone's busy.
Molly's younger, her brain works quicker.
Yeah. Look up Jedwin Smith on the Amazon.
Does anybody need a break after that one? You tired me out.
Yeah.
All right, second question. Y'all ready? And we can go in the same order if you don't mind.
Okay.
Tell us about your writing journey, how you became interested in writing, who or what inspires you, and how you go about your writing.
Fatal.
I never set out to write a book. I don't have quite the story you have, but I kind of failed my way upwards for a long time in different artistic careers. And I started out with poetry. I think a lot of us, our first love is poetry, when we're younger. And I started out writing poetry. But the cynicism came and beat my head in the door in my early 20s, and I stopped doing that and decided to be serious and just work on my career. And I say that tongue fully in cheek. And then, golly, I guess probably about 9 years ago, I started writing a book. And I played footsie with some regional publishers, and it didn't go anywhere because the economy went for the third time in the last 10 years or whatever. No, this was probably 2008, so my math isn't good. They said there would be no math. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that. Yeah, you got it. I said there'd be no math today. I had this book pretty much about halfway done, and then I was in a bicycle accident and about checked out. And in my convalescence, I said, I'm not going to wait around on these New York guys or folks in Georgia or whatnot. So I founded my own press, luckily with my connections in journalism. I knew a great team of layout folks and editors and proofreaders and all that, and launched my books. So what inspires me was part of the question, Senator. You started it, so you don't poke the bear, right? No, what inspires me, it's, I can't really put my finger on it, and I don't want that to sound like it's all in the ether, and, it's all some creative, there's definitely the creative nudge, the muse. I really think, as you were mentioning earlier with, there's not, the therapy aspect of it. I think a lot of it for me when my first book was, it's the desire for escapism. When my grandmother, who I loved so dearly, when she read my first novel, she goes, "Mom, I love your book, except for the fighting, the cussing, the drinking, the smoking, and the sex." I said, "Grandma, yeah, there's not much left there." And I said, "But my characters do this because I can't." At the time I had about a 3-hour round trip commute a day, and I was like, when I'm on 285, there's things I want to do. I can't do that. I don't want to go to Fulton County Jail for the night. But my characters can do these things. And again, vicariously, I can act out these adventures that are in my head. And then I think, so there's that aspect of it, and not to get too much in the weeds here, but two of my last 3 books have been young adult fantasy, which I never thought I'd write. But I think in that you also have the ability to tap into I don't want to say the more tender side, but there's definitely an emotional aspect you can get into when you're writing from an adult's perspective. If your character didn't have a strong father figure growing up, he can have that affinity towards someone in his book and a role model. So there's definitely that aspect that you can do consciously or subconsciously. I look back on some of my stuff now and I'm like, boy, this is a field day. I don't need, it's a field day for my counselor, just, how are you doing this week? Read the first chapter. Right. But, it's different things inspire me. I think it's just, I love good stories, whether it's, a great film or a great book or a great poem or play. The human condition is dynamic, and truth is stranger than fiction. It's a cliche, but there's a reason we keep saying it, because it's true. And people's stories, everybody has a story, and yours is pretty amazing. So you never know till you ask the right questions. So I took us around the lake to get to the end of the answer, but I hope I got there. Did I get it, Magic?
I think you got there.
All right, you mixed it all Magic.
Oh, magic.
Yeah.
So the writing journey, right?
Yes.
While you were talking, I was thinking about, and actually I think mine began when I was really, really young, because my first love was dancing. I started dancing when I was like 2 and a half, taking dance lessons. And I loved fairy tales. I loved dressing up when my friends came over when we were like 9, 10, 11. I had the play written, I had the costumes, I had to put them on, they had their parts, It was just a love for the stage was really first. And I wanted to be Shirley Temple very badly, but my hair wasn't curly enough and I can't sing. Now I can dance, but I couldn't sing. But I just loved the stage, loved stories. And when I started teaching, and I wanted to write, but I got lousy grades in creative writing in school. I did well on a commercial, and I was like, well, that sells out. I can never do that. And then when I started writing the plays for my students, for my dance students, I was watching them on stage one day, and I said, this is a book. This is a children's book. I wrote it in poetic verse because the kids would come in rapping, all right? And they could memorize entire songs rapping. I thought, it's because it rhymes. So I wrote this play in poetic verse called Sam the Crow, a barnyard ballet. And 2 of my cousins, one owns a publishing company in D.C. and another one was an artist. I convinced them. I said, let's do this book. Let Angie illustrate it and let's print it and sell it. Well, we did. That was in 2000? So that was the first book that I did. It was the children's book. And we marketed it, self-published, marketed it, worked really hard in Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama. And then 9/11 happened. And I'm like, I'm not getting on an airplane right now. So everything kind of came to a standstill. And I missed the writing terribly. And then I got asked to do the public relations and press for a zoning group, or a group in our county that was fighting the zoning from Atlanta. A guy that was coming in and wanted to zone a huge amount of property out in the middle of the country for an orphanage. So I kind of took the reins and did the PR and the press. And as a result of that, I got a job at the newspaper, with a newspaper group. The man who owned it actually bought the one I worked for in Athens.
Okay.
And he called me up and he said, are you the Pam Avery that sold ads for the Observer? I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, I'd like for you to try to do a story for me. That was Mr. Grimes, Miller Grimes. Some of you might know he just passed away not too long ago. So I did a feature for him on the FDR project, Warm Springs. He really liked it. He said, how would you like to write a column every week? And I said, can I say what I want to say? He said, yes, you can. I said, well, that's good because you need a woman on that editorial board. I said, you got, 5 of you old guys. That's it. I said, you need some press. So I started writing a column, and I had met Jane through some political action group in LaGrange, and she started editing the columns. That's, how I got, I made really good friends with her. And then one thing led to another. Before long, I was covering all of Harris County. I was his main reporter and doing county commission and everything, school board. And I learned so much. I would say, anybody, if you want to be a writer, get a job in a newspaper. I mean, it's incredible, And as I said before, after that happened, then we parted ways. Mr. Grimes sold the paper. And the man who who bought it is the only person I ever called out by name in a column. And I threw him under the bus big time. So when they told me he had bought the paper, I said, well, I'm cleaning my office out right now, which I did, and went back to school and taught. And Jane kept saying, when are you going to write that book? When are you going to write that book? Because I've been working on it, you know, you just can't help but, you know, when something happens in your life and you're just cussing somebody out in your, you know, not to them, but, you know, in absentia, you know, you can't help but write those lines down. And I was journaling a lot. She kept saying, when are you going to write that book? When are you going to write that
And
book?
it's not cotton candy either. I mean, you know,
Right.
she's not doing cotton candy.
I mean, it was pretty, you know, from the heart.
Yeah.
And so the journey just kept going, and it was incredible how it hit me. I was in a really deep funk, because for a lot of different reasons, and it was around my birthday, and I was at the beach in January, and I was with a friend of mine, and she said, I've never seen you just so down. I said, well, I just am. I just don't know what to do with myself, and I've never been like this. I always have something right there to go to, and I'm just not feeling good. And then I said, wait a minute, I know what I need to do, and as soon as I get home, I'm going to do it. And that's when I started cleaning out my office and working on that book. And Jane, and 2 years later, it was done. And Jane, we had a really great process where I would write and send it to her, send the chapter to her, and she would, you know, edit, make comments. While she was doing that, I'd work on some other stuff, and she'd get back to me, make the suggestions, I'd redo it, and then I'd have her another chapter. So it was just like this. We kept it going the whole time, and I was very disciplined, because I worked from home for a long time in a lot of different respects. So it was no problem for me to, okay, I'm gonna be in my office at 9. I wish you still that at home. But that was a result of it, those 2 years. And it was a lot of fun, and I miss it, because I've been marketing that like crazy. I've been extremely busy selling that, because it's what it takes. And my publisher, Randy, said, you know, I'm so glad both sides of your brain work. You know, because I can write it and market it. I probably had, 12, 13, 14 signings, launches. And it's been a journey, but I love it. A lot of work.
Excellent.
All right, third question. Solve for X. 3X plus, this is another
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, third question. What have you written and what are you currently working on?
I've written 8 books, 2 books of nonfiction. One's a compilation of my newspaper and magazine columns. One's about my journey as the father of a child with special needs. And then I have my Alexandria Rising trilogy, and then a prequel to that that just didn't just come out. It feels like it just came out last fall. And 2 of those are on Audible. And then I have 2, I guess, a duology. Does that sound cool enough for you, Magic?
I like that.
Okay, a duology of, they're called Arrestus Adventures, young adult fantasy. So right now, what am I working on? I kind of let my field grow fallow this year. In January, I knocked out a good 17,000 words on a 3rd book for my young adult fantasy series, and then I just, 8 books in 5 years was a lot. So I wanted to take some time off, and I've written a few short stories I'm shopping, I've never been a short story writer, and that was fun. And I dipped back into the poetry then this year, which I hadn't in ages, and just had a poem published in the Reach a Song by the Georgia Poetry Society. So I've been kind of taking a break from the novels and just playing around, getting back to that play. I think sometimes, you know, you're talking about the process. There's the deadlines, the writing, the rewriting, the meeting, the marketing. And it's like, what am I doing? You know, I want to get back to the fun. I want to be at play. So I've been working on kind of getting back at play again. I've got about, I guess, 3 or 4 novels I've started, which doesn't mean anything. Anybody can, I don't want to say anybody, that sounds demeaning. A lot of people can start a book. It's finishing it is what, you know, is the real, you know. So I've got a few little feeders out. I've got one I'm really excited about. My main character in the Alexandria Rising, not to get too much in the weeds, but he's in his early 30s and works at a newspaper. And, you know, so I wrote this in, I guess, you know, 15, 16. And he's a smart aleck, and he's, you know, a dichotomous character, and, you know, has his faults, but tries to do good. And I've started a book now, which is about a guy who's almost 50 and is a smart aleck and has a kind of a dark past. And
A biography,
kids,
huh?
You know, again, we go back to catharsis.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
watched a little too many Guy Ritchie movies lately and thought I'd, you know, put that together. So I'm working on here and there, but I really think, you know, and I think this is important for everyone in the room and for all writers, is, you know, sometimes it's good to go back to play, you know? I mean, sometimes it's good to, you know, sit around and read your Shakespeare, your T.S. Eliot, or your Carl Sandburg Rutabaga poems, and, you know, Barnyard Ballet, and, I mean, realize why you got into it in the first place. And so I've been trying to read a lot and then and do a little dabble. So that's kind of where I'm heading now. I will say this, and this is just for the benefit of anybody who loves good writing. I have an article coming out next month in Appalachia Bear magazine. If you haven't read it, it's B-A-R-E. They cover Southern culture. Brilliant resource. And I'm writing a piece on Byron Herbert Reese for their Resurrecting Forgotten Writers. And I say this not to pump up the article, but for Reese. If you aren't familiar with Reese, he was the Georgia poet, 2 Guggenheims, cover of Life magazine, Pulitzer Prize nominee, and a lot of people have forgotten about him. He's from North Georgia, so, you know, it's worth checking out. I just say that so proud.
Is that an online magazine?
Yes, yep, Appalachia Bear, and it's fantastic. I mean, across the board, just fantastic writing and storytelling. But, so, big ups to the BH Reese, as you call him. Isn't that what you call him, DJ Reese, Byron Herbert Reese? You started it. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing, and then a little plug for all my, what do you say, my peeps and the, I can't remember, all the people at Appalachia Bear. You're like, what is going on up there? So yeah, so that's what's cracking.
Okay.
Magic.
For the record, I've never said the word peeps in my life. So Marshall,
I had to break it up. I was feeling a little self-conscious, you know, and I'm like, I'm rambling, and so I just got to remember. You said anytime you can't remember what to say, always say peeps, and always call your poets DJ Eliot, DJ Shakespeare. I'm following his lead. That's what I do.
Hi, Pam.
Well, I've self-published with my cousins 2 children's books back in the early 2000s, you know, 20 plus years ago. And then that was it for a while because I was in newspaper. And then last spring, I collaborated with an artist on another children's book. I actually, while I was doing this one, but I wrote a poem for my granddaughters for Valentine's Day. Just as I was realizing a lot of the things that I felt like had helped me evolve and get to the point of where I could be who I wanted to be and be fine with it. And the lessons that I learned that helped me do that, and I wanted to share that with them. So I wrote this poem, and a friend of mine was reading it, had a place in Atlanta in her house, an apartment, and she was reading it, and she said, and we've been friends since 1970-something, she said, you realize this is a book? I said, oh my gosh, and all of a sudden I thought of Tom Barnes. And he was actually married to the woman who was my ballet mentor as an adult, who was the first one who wrote plays, right? Who gave me that inspiration. She was a real, inspiration for me. So I called Tom and I said, Tom, and she passed away, we lost her 4 years ago. I called Tom and I said, Tom, I have an idea. And he said, that is very dangerous coming from you, Tom. And I said, but it's a good one, it really is. And I told him, and he said, well, send me the poem and I'll see. He said, Gail always wanted me to turn her ballets into books. And it just never happened. Just never happened. So I don't know. I said, well, gotta try. So I sent it to him. And his drawings are his art is very successful, very Toulouse will attract poster art, real bold, and faces and eyes and color and hair and, dressed up women. So I sent the poem to him, and 3 days later, he sent me a text. He said, I have 8 drawings done. So he loved it, and my publisher has it now. We got to get a prize, all of that for doing it. But and so that's in the works. This is my first novel for adult readers, and I wrote for adults and did the paper. But this is something I really wanted to do, and I started on the second one, the research, and kind of mapping it out where my characters are. It's a sequel to this. There are probably 2 more in the series. But I'm also juggling my son's campaign, so I could not be busier. But a friend of mine said, if you want to get something done, give it to a woman who's always busy. So I don't have much time to I don't have that block of time like I had when I did Tanner's Out of Town, when I knew Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I write. Wednesday, I go to the grocery store. Saturday and Sunday, I watch Game of Thrones. I don't have that luxury right now. But I do think about it and make notes and do research. On the second book, we're also, my publisher has me getting my poems, compiling my poems. I've written a lot of poems, I think that's the way we start. And my columns, to have that as a book that actually is going to be by the lead character, Lucy Tanner. It's going to be by her, which really gave me the idea of something for the next book, her evolution as a character. And probably the most exciting thing, Randy pitched it to a screenwriter who took it, and in LA, and he's done first 30 pages and starting on the next 30. So, of course, they don't work with nothing, but the fact that he accepted it really made me excited. So we'll see where that goes. But as I was writing it, I was seeing it. I've had a lot of people say that, So we'll see how it goes. I'm just ready for this election to get over, and for my kids to come for Christmas and go home. So I can start writing again, but my son's getting married in April, so it's not.
Wow.
It's gonna be busy, but I'm really ready to get into that second book.
Now, did you do your reading? Good question. Did you do your reading on the Audible, or did you?
No, I've got a narrator I work with out of England, Tom Cassidy, Thomas Cassidy, to go formal.
Okay.
And he's bloody brilliant. And I was just really lucky because I hate my own voice. And he's, no, it's okay. So anytime I try to do a woman's voice, when I was trying to read it, I giggled. I was like, come here, she said. I'd be like, I can't take myself seriously. But this guy's real fantastic. Have you ever had that where you're listening to a book on tape and there's like this very erudite British voice and he's like, John walked into the room. Hello there, Daddy, she said. And you're like, what? This just totally took me out of the book, man. So, but long answer. I did not. I'd like to, but I lack the confidence. So.
I'm not going to read mine either.
Not yet.
Lightning round, anything that you want to talk about that hasn't come up yet?
There's just a lot. I mean, every time you said something, it just fires something off. I think that with writing, it's interesting. You were saying things that you want to pass on, and I think a lot of it, and this deals with age, and I'm not trying to get too much into the cosmos here, esoteric, but I think you're writing and searching for a lot of your life, and then you get to a point where you start to see certain truths and you want to pass them on. And I'm by no means wise, but I've seen some truths I want to pass on, and with my young adult fantasy and some of my other older characters, I'm able to do that, and that's really neat because nobody's going to listen to me. I have children, so, but it's one thing to stay in the line at the gas station or, whatnot, and you try to drop some wisdom. But if your characters can say it, that's pretty neat because you feel like you're passing something on. It's a lot like faith in the fact that just because your character says it doesn't mean that you do it or that you live it or believe it. But there's something, really cool about that. It's the striving towards it. And then also, too, just talking about the process, I think it's, and I was talking to a friend of mine, it's that discipline. And that's so crucial. And it's, Mike's been researching his tail off all over the South forever, it seems like. Mm-hmm. I know that's what his wife is thinking. But it's the discipline and it's the research. And even if you're writing fiction, it's the tenets. I'd never written fantasy, and there's not a lot of magic. But there's, quote, rules to it. And if you have a land, there's geography. And if you go north, this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And in the next book, if you go north, well, you can't say, well, then it didn't. You have to have, you have to have certain consistencies, and that's the world building. And that's whether it's in South Georgia in 1924, or it's in Mars and 3000 and whatever. It's so just that discipline, that research, that planning. I just say that to anybody who's wanting to write a book. Go for it. Go for it. It keeps me off the streets. And my wife will agree with me. Amen. But be prepared too that it's, as you were saying earlier, you don't sit around and finish the book and then sit around and smoke your pipe and have your coffee and wait as the money comes in. You do it because you love it.
Right.
Is it formulaic for you though? Do you have your little formula?
I guess my formula, and I've never thought about it consciously, but I don't write linearly. I don't write from, sometimes I've had 2 books where I wrote the end first.
Right.
And then I wrote the beginning and then stitching.
Yeah.
But I guess my formula is not to have a formula and not to be completely abstract, not like E.E. Cummings writing a novel, but to go with the flow to a degree. And if you're really feeling the ending, well, you can come backwards, but don't force yourself. There's a lot of books that are like, here's how you write. First you do an outline, then you do this. And I'm like, man, if that works for you, that's great, but it doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
Like building suspense.
No, I really,
or do you just put it out there?
I put it out there. I think, golly, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without sounding pretentious.
Okay.
Can I use a British accent? One of the best things I've discovered. No, I think I really feel a lot of the anxiety. And that's just a fact. And I did want to talk about writing as therapy later if there's time. But I think if you've ever dealt with those things, either as a child or a teenager or adult, and we all have in certain ways, and we've all dealt with stuff. Fear, anxiety, whatnot. And if you've dealt with any violence, for good or bad, or wanted to do it, it's going to come out on the page. I don't have a formula like, then at this chapter, so and so. Sometimes I think I probably could have used some formulas, but I usually just kind of, because I feel, if I want to beat the tar out of somebody, I really want to do it. It's going to come out really fast on the page. So
This is the way real life is.
yeah,
You know, you can't plan, you can't orchestrate, you can't outline what's coming around the pipe.
right.
It's how your character is set up to be able to respond to anything that your creative mind throws out there in front of them.
Marlena, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't too rambly. So
Thank you, Stephen King.
I mean, it is what it is.
You know, I get this so many times when I'm at these signings or launchings, people go, I just always wanted to write a book. How many times you heard that?
Yes, yes.
I always wanted to write a book. And I said, well, then you go to the dollar store, you get you one of those little black and white composition books, you know, and if you like poetry, you get one for poetry. If you like political commentary, you get one for that. If you want to do fiction, you get one for that. You label it, and when you have ideas, you write it down. Because writing is like any physical endeavor. You know, I mean, if you're going to run, you don't start with a marathon. You walk around the block. Well, with writing, it's just putting the pen on the paper and taking that first step. And when you get inspired with a line, no matter what it is from, if it's anger for somebody, love for somebody, exasperation for, you know, a current event, write it down. It's that process of taking what's in your mind and your heart and putting it on the paper and getting a roll for it over and over. And I think that's so important. That's what I did for years before I actually wrote with the little composition books, and I still have them and refer to them at times. So I think that's very, very important. And as far as I totally agree with you. People say, "Do you start with an outline?" And I just started laughing. I was like, no. I knew where I wanted this to take place. Northwest Georgia, the Great Valley, part of the Cherokee Nation. I knew that because that's where my mother's family came from. And that area intrigued me. So the first thing I did was go to the library with Jane and just do a whole lot of research. And then I bought books. I bought The History of Gordon County by Miss Lula Pitts. And I'm certain she and I are the only folks who have ever read that book from the beginning to the end. But I did. It was fascinating. I learned so much. Before I actually started writing, did all the research. And then I started writing all this stuff about the characters, the main characters, especially the older ones in the book, the mom and dad, about when they were kids and younger. That's not in this book.
Right, backstories.
But
Yep.
that's how I got to know them. And so then when I started the book, I knew them. I knew what they were going to say, how they were going to say it, how they were going to react. Mm-hmm. So that then life came in, and I knew what Genevieve Tanner was going to do. I knew what Luke Tanner was going to do. I knew what little Hank was going to do, you know. So it was my own formula. And I think that's really important. And then when I got to the end, what I knew, what I felt like was the end, unless a publisher came in and said ABC. And I had edited, split up chapters and everything, and then I went back and added the first two sections in the book.
Right. I did that with my first novel.
Very
too.
first two sections, I was like, I got to do something to set the stage for this. And, you know, putting it all together is just so much fun. And I miss it, you know, but I just think that ended, the first time I did an outline was in the screenwriter called my publisher and said, I need her outline. And I said, what outline? I had an outline. Randy said, well, you got to do one. And so I started working on the outline, just going through the book, and I got like 3 chapters, and Randy commented. He said, are you done yet? I said, no, I'm not done yet. And you tell him this is not fun. And I usually don't do things unless they're fun. And this is like being in a college English course, and I'm hating it, okay? But after I got through like the first 5 chapters in it, the outline, you know, came much faster. But.
Question, do either one of you, over your years, keep a daily journal or a daily diary? Do you write in a daily journal or a daily diary? Not about your writing, just about life.
I used to. I did as a kid, and then I did when I lived on the boat, and for a few years after that. And I'm done. I should, because I just found my grandmother's diary. It's there. And I just started reading it. But
Because when you talk about I have
You
for
do?
25 years, and you talk about the composition books, that's what I put them in, those black and white composition.
because they don't tell out.
Correct.
Oh, that's wonderful. You inspire me that to me is and that's that discipline. You know, and once you start doing that, a lot of times you go back and you read something and you can pull something out of it and use it. Because I've had that happen. One of the lines that I threw out to the universe when I was actually doing this, and I just screamed it out. And I said, Mama always cleans out the garage when she gets rid of a man. And I said, that's a good one. And I just stopped what I was doing. I was covered in sweat and dirt and went in and grabbed my composition book and wrote it down, you know. It's like, and it's in there. You know, but I just think it's important to be in touch with your creative spirit and not be afraid to share it. And that's the hard part. That's the hard part. That's why writing for the newspaper is so important. Because you get over that.
Yes, yes.
You have to, very quickly.
Now, what I would find, this is an invitation to both of you. So when we get into our writers groups, and we have our writer groups meeting, both of you individually like to be scheduled to sit there and share some of these to actual writers who are struggling with the same questions and answers and problems and challenges, whether it be family or, you know, trying to put it all together. I hope that you two would be, you guys are, you just have a treasure chest, a treasure trove of experience, and your humor helps, because it hurts to be a writer sometimes. And we do have to have a sense of humor. So,
You got to be able to laugh at yourself.
yeah. Well,
You have to be able to laugh at yourself and let other people laugh at you too.
yeah, absolutely. What I want to do, Scott, if I may.
Well, I have a question for Mark first.
Go ahead, do it.
Do you think writing is therapeutic?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Definitely.
And I do want to just touch on that real quickly, because I was thinking about this last evening and where we are in this wonderful, facility and group. And I encourage, everybody needs an outlet. We all know that. Everybody needs ways to get out things that bother us. And I just encourage anyone, to write. And a quick two-pronged thing on that is, number one, it doesn't have to be a book. You don't have to show anybody. I had a friend of mine, he said, I'm so angry. I said, write it. I'm not a writer. I said, it doesn't matter. You can just write blackthorn crows beat at my brain as I rage against the sky. And then not show it to anyone, but it's not in here. It's not in here. Churchill said the black dog, kick the black dog out the door. So I encourage that. It's a great way of therapy, of just flushing that toxic stuff out of your soul on a bad day, whether you do it first person or poem or through a character. And I encourage that across the board. And then, just second of all, our ancestors didn't start out to write books to be successful. Homer didn't sit around the fire and go, I hope in 4,000 years I torture college students reading my epics. The mythology started as entertainment. It started as fun. I mean, Beowulf wasn't, written for Seamus Heaney to translate and get his little Nobel. I sound like such a horse's still. But I mean, so my point is too, it's important, to market the work that's done, with Mike and, this wonderful group is fantastic, but let's not forget why we write.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just my two encouragements. I think it's so important for, if you want to write, for therapy, and then also, at play, let's sometimes it's good not to worry about the other stuff. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Well, what I wanted to do real quick, so you know what, we had Mark Wallace Maguire, which we'll make sure we formally have introduced, and Miss Pam Avery. But what do they do? Let me show you. This is a commercial brought to you by Miss Pam Avery, the Tanner side of town, that I would like for you to be able to purchase. I know that there's copies of this at a pretty good bookstore in the Grange. Where else could you find them at, Pam?
You can get it on my website, PamAveryPrinted.com,
PamAveryPrinted.com.
and on Amazon.
Of course, Amazon.
Let's see, Cat's Meow and Pine Mountain.
I bet you I can get this for you into Corner Arts Gallery in downtown Newnan.
That'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
So-
But you can get it directly from my website or Amazon, and it's on Kindle too.
Yeah,
On
and
Amazon.
if you'd like to know more about Pam Avery, she will be with part of our September 15th hometown novel nights at the at the Carnegie Library on that Thursday night. Now, this is a little harder because he owns half this table, but I'm not going to do it all, but I'm going to do a portion. All right, see if I do this right. Okay. He talked about his trilogy. This is Mark Wallace Maguire. Alexandria Rising is the first of his 3 books that are in the Alexandria Rising, Redeemed, and Reborn.
Yes, sir.
Series. Boy, that's good. I'm not that old yet.
I'm telling
I'm telling you. And then, and this, by the way, is at Corner Arts Gallery and all over the place, including going to Mark Wallace Maguire. What's the website?
AlexandriaRising.com.
That one, AlexandriaRising.com, which I should have known because I've been there. Then, this is part of the prequel.
That's the young adult duology. It's
Oh, yeah.
hard for me to say.
There you go. The Last Wizard. So, you've got that young adult, teenager, if you like J.R. Tolkien, if you like C.S. Lewis, this is the place to go. Am I close on that? All right. That's what I tell most people at Corner Arts Gallery. In Pursuit of the Pale Prince. Equally, it's interesting to get into this world that he has created. So I wanted to promote that. And one other, and this is not even all of his books. I'm getting tired. I'm getting old to do this. The Code Breaker's Tale is another one of Mark's, which is part of an Alexandria Rising. This is the prequel.
Yes.
Yes, I cheated because I read that on the spine.
That's all good. Yeah.
But a lot of those are available, obviously, at Corner Arts Gallery, who supports us in a lot of things that we do here on Court Square in downtown Newnan. But where else can they get it, Mark?
All the locations are on the website, but Warm Springs Cellars, our
Yeah.
wonderful friends
Yeah.
there. Corner Arts Gallery, as you mentioned, pretty good books.
Pretty good books, yeah.
Jay Rigsby and that crowd. And there's a few other places that are escaping me at the moment. And then, of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
And in the bookshelves and homes of people all over this area. So
The bookshelves and homes of discerning readers everywhere.
must be discerning that has an English accent at home. So, now I wanted to throw that in because sometimes we forget, we get hung up on the authors because you met these wonderful authors and now you know that they write really good stuff too. So please support them. And I want to think that, Scott, I'm going to let you wrap it up, but I think we really appreciate having these two.
Last call for questions. Any questions for our audience? If you're watching at home tonight on Facebook Live, I'd like you to hit the like button. And I want to thank Hank and Shelley Arnold. They're not here tonight, but they're the people behind the scenes that here at Coweta FORCE. Thank you, Hank and Shelley, for hosting us tonight. And we'll be back again here in 2 months on the 3rd Thursday of October. And the 3rd Thursday of September, we'll be back at the Carnegie Library. So I want to thank our panel tonight, Mark and Pam. It was a pleasure. And thank y'all for joining us.
And see y'all at the Sharpsburg Book Fair a week from Saturday.
August 27th. Be there. Buy my books, please. Somebody has at the college.